Hi, and welcome to another episode of Punk Rock Politics with John Smith. I'm John Smith, and this is Punk Rock Politics. I heard about this story on, I believe, a Jimmy Dore show, recent episode from yesterday, and it's a big one. This is the UNZ Review mobile. It's the mobile website. Whitney Web Archive, blog view. Techno-tyranny, how the U.S. national security state is using coronavirus to fulfill an Orwellian vision. Whitney Webb, April 20th, 2020. All right. If you don't know who George Orwell is, he is the author of 1984, talking about, a security state and the government taking over and suppressing individuality and all that kind of stuff. So that's what they mean by Orwellian. Last year, a government commission called for the U.S. to adopt an AI-driven mass surveillance system far beyond that used in any other country in order to ensure American hegemony in artificial intelligence, which is AI. Now, many of the obstacles they had cited as preventing its implementation are rapidly being removed under the guise of combating the coronavirus crisis. Okay. Last year, a U.S. government body dedicated to examining how artificial intelligence can address the national security and defense needs of the United States discussed in detail the structural changes that the American economy and society must undergo in order to ensure a technological advantage over China, according to a recent document acquired through an FOIA request, which is a Freedom of Information Act request, which Ralph Nader successfully fought for and accomplished as a consumer advocate attorney. This document suggests that the U.S. followed China's lead and even surpassed them in many aspects related to AI-driven technologies, particularly their use of mass surveillance. This perspective clearly clashes with the public rhetoric of prominent U.S. government officials and politicians on China who have labeled the Chinese government's technology investments and export of its surveillance system and other technologies as a major threat to Americans' way of life. In addition, many of the steps for the implementation of such a program in the U.S., as laid out in this newly available document, are currently being promoted and implemented as part of the government's response to the current coronavirus or COVID-19 crisis. This likely due to the fact that many members of this same body have considerable overlap with the task forces and advisors currently guiding the government's plans to reopen the economy and efforts to use technology to respond to the current crisis. The FOIA document, obtained by the Electronic Privacy Information Center, or EPIC, was produced by a little-known U.S. government organization called the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, or NSCAI. It was created by the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, and its official purpose is to consider the methods and means necessary to advance the development of artificial intelligence, or AI, machine learning, and associated technologies to comprehensively address the national security and defense needs of the United States. The NSCAI is a key part of the government's response to what is often referred to as the coming Fourth Industrial Revolution. I'm going to read that again because the text popped up. The NSCAI is a key part of the government's response to what is often referred to as the coming Fourth Industrial Revolution, which has been described as a revolution characterized by discontinuous technological development in areas like artificial intelligence, big data, fifth-generation telecommunications networking, or 5G, nanotechnology, and biotechnology, robotics, the Internet of Things, or IoT, and quantum computing. However, their main focus is ensuring that the United States maintain a technological advantage in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other associated technologies related to national security and defense. The Vice Chair of NSCAI, Robert Work, former Deputy Secretary of Defense and Senior Fellow at the Hawkish Center for a New American Security, or CNAS, described the Commission's purpose as determining how the U.S. national security apparatus should approach artificial intelligence, including a focus on how the government can work with industry to compete with China's civil-military fusion concept. What the U.S. government should really be doing is implementing extremely regulated and restricted use of artificial intelligence over only after we have a congressional and very public debate where security experts and technology experts and constitutional experts and privacy rights experts and all of these people are called in to have a discussion and the implications. And I think that just because China is doing something insane does not justify us doing something insane. So maybe we shouldn't do this at all. In fact, I'm saying we shouldn't. Artificial intelligence is very dangerous and may provide some amazing accomplishments, but it will be used most likely to destroy us and even exploit us even further. Just like a basic concept, like, the planet is dying and suffering. Who's causing it? Humans. Kill all humans. It's that simple. It's a simple jump. That's why many cartoons have covered the topic. The recently released NSCAI document is a May 2019 presentation entitled Chinese Tech Landscape Overview. Throughout the presentation, the NSCIA promotes the overhaul of the U.S. economy and way of life as necessary for allowing the U.S. to ensure it holds a considerable technological advantage over China, as losing this advantage is currently deemed a major national security issue by the U.S. national security apparatus. This concern about maintaining a technological advantage can be seen in several other U.S. military documents and think tank reports, several of which have warned that the U.S. technological advantage is quickly eroding. The U.S. government and establishment media outlets often blame alleged Chinese espionage or the Chinese government's more explicit partnerships with private technology companies in support of their claim that the U.S. is losing this advantage over China. For instance, Chris Darby, the current CEO of the CIA's In-Q-Tel, who is also on the NSCAI, told CBS News last year that China is the U.S.'s main competitor in terms of technology and that U.S. privacy laws were hampering the U.S. capacity to counter China in this regard, stating that data is the new oil and China is just awash with data, and they don't have the same restraints that we do around collecting it and using it because of the privacy difference between our countries. This notion that they have the largest labeled data set in the world is going to be a huge strength for them. In another example, Michael Dempsey, former acting director of national intelligence and currently a government-funded fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, argued in The Hill that it's quite clear, though, that China is determined to erase our technological advantage and is committing hundreds of billions of dollars to this effort. In particular, China is determined to be a world leader in such areas as artificial intelligence, high-performance computing, and synthetic biology. These are the industries that will shape life on the planet and the military balance of power for the next several decades. It's funny how the U.S. doesn't say, well, we could use artificial intelligence to combat China's authoritarian collection of data and to, prove models as how beneficial it will be economically and for so many people to get rid of militaries in the war machine. But no, they just have to do the thing that they are calling out as evil better and more evilly than China. It's absurd. In fact, the national security apparatus of the United States is so concerned about losing a technological edge over China that the Pentagon recently decided to join forces directly with the U.S. intelligence community in order to get in front of Chinese advances in artificial intelligence. This union resulted in the creation of the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, or JAIC, which ties together the military's effort with those of the intelligence community, allowing them to combine efforts in a breakneck push to move government's AI initiatives forward. It also coordinates with other government agencies, industry, academics, and U.S. allies. Robert Work, who subsequently became the Robert Work, who subsequently became the NSCAI vice chair, said at the time that JAIC's creation was a welcome first step in response to Chinese, and to a lesser extent Russian, plans to dominate these technologies. Similar concerns about losing technological advantage to China have also been voiced by the NSCAI chairman Eric Schmidt, the former head of Alphabet, Google's parent company, who argued in February in the New York Times that Silicon Valley could soon lose the technology wars to China if the U.S. government doesn't take action. Thus, the three main groups represented within the NSCAI, the intelligence community, the Pentagon, and Silicon Valley, all view China's advancements in AI as a major national security threat, and in Silicon Valley's case, threat to their bottom lines and market shares that must be tackled quickly. Oh, God, excuse me. Stayed up all night doing this stuff. That's punk rock. It's punk rock politics, baby. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. Click the bell and double click it to get the little parentheses around it so you get updates for my new videos. And click all if you're on a laptop so you get updates to my videos. You might not see any of them. That's how it works now. Targeting China's adoption advantage. Also go to patreon.com/punkrockpolitics and become a patron today. Targeting China's adoption advantage. In the May 2019 Chinese Tech Landscape Overview presentation, the NSCIA... Oh my God! In the May 2019 Chinese Tech Landscape Overview presentation, the NSCAI discusses that while the U.S. still leads in the creation stage of AI and related technologies, it lags behind China in the adoption stage due to structural factors. It says that creation followed by adoption and iteration are the three phases of the life cycle of new tech, and asserts that failing to dominate in the adoption stage will allow China to leapfrog the U.S. and dominate AI for the foreseeable future. Which also doesn't make sense because we can invest in AI with government accountability and without doing these crazy tricks and help things, and we don't need to compete with them to know where everybody is at all times on every camera and track everybody's cell phone and just be able to openly go into anybody's accounts and read all their information and hear all their private conversations. That's not necessary to compete with China. We could use artificial intelligence for technology in a responsible way, and we could help solve climate change and reconstruct buildings that fell apart and ancient ruins. Like, we could do all that stuff, to the positive side of it, as long as we have oversight and make sure that we don't let AI advance to the point where it literally can take over the world and just kill all humans or kill all animals or whatever, blow the planet up, or because life is meaningless or what, any of that stuff. Anyway, so the presentation that we were just talking about before this also argues that in order to leapfrog competitors in emerging markets, what is needed is not individual brilliance, but instead specific structural conditions that exist within certain markets. It cites several case studies where China is considered to be leapfrogging the U.S. due to major differences in these structural factors. Thus, the insinuation of the document, though not directly stated, is that the U.S. must alter the structural factors that are currently responsible for its lagging behind China in the adoption phase of AI-driven technologies. Let's zoom in. This is what we're talking about. Open questions for the future of technology. In which other tech-enabled verticals will China's adoption advantage allow it to leapfrog the U.S.? My predictions: AI, medical diagnosis, smart cities. How does the U.S. defend its advantage in core creation? For verticals where Chinese companies are world leaders, expand beyond Chinese borders. What does it mean for Chinese tech giants to have control of pieces of critical digital infrastructure in other countries, e.g. Indian financial system? Who makes decisions? To what extent can they stand up to the government? Chief among the troublesome structural factors highlighted in this presentation are so-called legacy systems that are common in the U.S., but much less so in China. The NSCAI document states that examples of legacy systems include a financial system that still utilizes cash and card payments, individual car ownership. Why is that popping up? Sorry. And even receiving medical attention from a human doctor. It states that while these legacy systems in the U.S. are good enough, too many good enough systems hinder the adoption of new things, specifically AI-driven systems. Another structural factor deemed by the NSCAI to be an obstacle to the U.S. ability... Another structural factor deemed by NSCAI to be an obstacle to the U.S.'s ability to maintain a technological advantage over China is the scale of the consumer market, arguing that extreme urban density on-demand service adoption. So extreme urban density. So they're arguing that extreme urban density equals on-demand service adoption. In other words, extreme urbanization results in more people using online or mobile-based on-demand services, ranging from ride-sharing to online shopping. It also cites the use of mass surveillance on China's huge population base and is an example of how China's scale of consumer market advantage allowing China to leap ahead in the fields of related technologies like facial recognition. There's the little thing there. Creation, adoption, iteration. The U.S. leads in the creation stage. Core technology and new user paradigms are still largely invented here, but adoption happens far more quickly in China due to structural factors. The most significant of these are lack of legacy systems. I already explained that. Scale of consumer market. Extreme urban density equals on-demand service adoption. Explicit government support and involvement, e.g. facial recognition deployment. Iteration, what happens when you have a huge, highly receptive user base to iterate on, and the investment that justifies. Eventually, the resultant experiences has evolved so much that it is nearly unrecognizable. Yep. Okay. In addition to the alleged shortcomings of the U.S.'s legacy systems and lack of extreme urban density, the NSCAI also calls for more explicit government support and involvement as a means to speed up the adoption of these systems in the U.S. This includes the government lending its stores of data on civilians to train AI, specifically citing facial recognition databases and mandating that cities be re-architected around AV's autonomous vehicles, among others. Other examples given include the government investing large amounts of money in AI startups and adding tech behemoths to a national public-private AI task force focused on smart city implementation, among other things. With regards to the latter, the document says this level of public-private cooperation in China is outwardly embraced by the parties involved, with this serving as a stark contrast to the controversy around Silicon Valley selling to the U.S. government. Examples of such controversy from the NSCAI's perspective likely include Google employees petitioning to end the Google Pentagon Project Maven, which uses Google's AI software to analyze footage captured by drones. Google eventually chose not to renew its Maven contract as a result of the controversy, even though top Google executives viewed the project as a golden opportunity to collaborate more closely with the military and intelligence communities. The document also defines another aspect of government support as the clearing of regulatory barriers. This term is used in the document specifically with respect to U.S. privacy laws, despite the fact that U.S. national security state has long violated these laws with near complete impunity. However, the document seems to suggest that privacy laws in the U.S. should be altered so that what the U.S. government has done in secret with private citizen data can be done more openly and more extensively. The NSCAI document also discusses the removal of regulatory barriers in order to speed up the adoption of self-driving cars, even though autonomous driving technology has resulted in several deadly and horrific car accidents and presents other safety concerns. Alright, this is one of the documents from this report they're talking about. Facial recognition expands beyond surveillance. Creation, breakthroughs in using machine learning for image recognition initially occurred in the U.S. Yay, we started something terrible again. And then blamed it on somebody else, and now we're doing it even worse, or want to. 2. Adoption surveillance use cases, clearing of regulatory barriers, and enormous government stores of data, explicit government support on a huge population base, scale of consumer market, have allowed China to leap ahead. 3. Iteration. Facial recognition is being deployed all across China, e.g. at office buildings, making payments. There is a very real possibility that the investment surveillance has justified could allow China to leap ahead in image recognition and biometrics. Also discussed is how China's adoption advantage will allow it to leapfrog the U.S. in several new fields, including AI medical diagnosis and smart cities. It then asserts that the future will be decided at the intersection of private enterprise and policy leaders between China and the U.S. If this coordination over the global AI market does not occur, The document warns that we, the U.S., risk being left out of the discussions where norms around AI are set for the rest of our lifetimes. The presentation also dwells considerably on how. The presentation also dwells considerably on how the main battleground in technology are not the domestic Chinese and U.S. markets, but what it refers to as the NBU, or Next Billion Users market, where it states that Chinese players will aggressively challenge Silicon Valley. In order to challenge them more successfully, the presentation argues that just like we view the market of teenagers as a harbinger for new trends, we should look at China. The document also expresses concerns about China exporting AI more extensively and intensively than the U.S., saying that China is already crossing borders by helping to build facial databases in Zimbabwe and selling image recognition and smart city systems to Malaysia. If allowed to become the unambiguous leader in AI, it says that China could end up writing much of the rulebook of international norms around the deployment of AI, and it would broaden China's sphere of influence amongst an international community that increasingly looks to the pragmatic authoritarianism of China and Singapore as an alternative to Western liberal democracy. What will replace the U.S. legacy systems? Given that the document makes it quite clear that legacy systems in the U.S. are impeding its ability to prevent China from leapfrogging ahead in AI and then dominating it for the foreseeable future, it is also important to examine what the document suggests should replace these legacy systems in the U.S. As previously mentioned, one legacy system cited early on in the presentation is the main means of payment for most Americans, cash and credit/debit cards. The presentation asserts, in contrast to these legacy systems, that the best and most advanced system is moving entirely to smartphone-based digital wallets. It notes specifically the main mobile wallet provider in India, Paytm, is majority owned by Chinese companies. It quotes an article which states that a big break came in 2016 when India canceled 86% of its currency in circulation in an effort to cut corruption and bring more people into the tax net by forcing them to use less cash. At the time, claims that India's 2016 currency reform would be used as a stepping stone towards a cashless society were dismissed by some as conspiracy theory. However, last year a committee convened by India's central bank and led by an Indian tech oligarch who also created India's massive civilian biometric database resulted in the India government's Cashless India program. Regarding India's 2016 currency reform, the NSCAI document then asserts that this would be unfathomable in the West. And unsurprisingly, when 86% of the cash got canceled and nobody had a credit card, mobile wallets in India exploded, laying the groundwork for a far more advanced payment ecosystem in India than the U.S. However, it has become increasingly less unfathomable in light of the current coronavirus crisis, which has seen efforts to reduce the amount of cash used because paper bills may carry the virus, as well as effort to introduce a Federal Reserve-backed digital dollar. In addition, the NSCAI document from last May calls for the end of in-person shopping and promotes moving towards all shopping being performed online. It argues that American companies have a lot to gain by adopting ideas from Chinese companies by shifting towards exclusive e-commerce purchasing options. It states that only shopping online provides a great experience and also adds that when buying online is literally the only way to get what you want, consumers go online. Terrible. Another legacy system that the NSCAI seeks to overhaul is car ownership, as it promotes autonomous or self-driving vehicles and further asserts that fleet ownership is greater than individual ownership. It specifically points to a need for a centralized ride-sharing network, which it says is needed to coordinate cars to achieve near 100% utilization rates. However, it warns against ride-sharing networks that need a human operator paired with each vehicle, and also asserts that fleet ownership makes more sense than individual car ownership. Excuse me. It also specifically calls for these fleets to not only be composed of self-driving cars, but electric cars, and cites reports that China has the world's most aggressive electric vehicle goals and seeks to lead in an emerging industry. The document states that China leads in ride-sharing today, even though ride-sharing was pioneered first in the U.S. It asserts once again that the U.S. legacy system of individual car ownership and lack of extreme urban density are responsible for China's dominance in this area. It also predicts that China will achieve mass autonomous vehicle adoption before the U.S., largely because the lack of mass car ownership in China leads to far more consumer receptiveness to AVs or autonomous vehicles. It then notes that earlier mass adoption leads to a virtuous cycle that allows Chinese core self-driving tech to accelerate beyond its Western counterparts. In addition to their vision for a future financial system and future self-driving transport system, the NSCAI has a similarly dystopian vision for surveillance. The document calls mass surveillance one of the first and best customers for AI and a killer application for deep learning. It also states that having streets carpeted with cameras is good infrastructure. It then discusses how an entire generation of AI unicorn companies are collecting the bulk of their early revenue from government security contracts and praises the use of AI in facilitating policing activities. It's scary as hell the more I read. For instance, it lauds reports that police are making convictions based on phone calls monitored with iFlyTech's voice recognition technology, and that police departments are using AI facial recognition tech to assist in everything from catching traffic law violators to resolving murder cases. Excuse me. It's unbelievable. And Facebook is asking for facial recognition when they lock you out of your account. And I got to talk to them about why I didn't think about that, because I was too busy doing heavy stuff and sweating and out in the sun and soaking wet and doing heavy lifting, and totally just wanted to have access to my channel real quick. Anyway, on the point of facial recognition technology specifically, the NSCAI document asserts that China has leapt ahead of the U.S. on facial recognition, even though breakthroughs in using machine learning for image recognition initially occurred in the U.S. It claims that China's advantage in this instance is because they have government-implemented mass surveillance, clearing of regulatory barriers, enormous government-provided stores of data, explicit government support combined with private sector databases on a huge population base, scale of consumer market. As a consequence of this, NSCAI argues China is also to leap ahead of the U.S. in both image and facial recognition and biometrics. The document also points to another glaring difference between the U.S. and its rivals, stating that in the press and politics of America and Europe, AI is painted as something to be feared that is eroding privacy and stealing jobs. Conversely, China views it as both a tool for solving major macroeconomic challenges in order to sustain their economic miracle and an opportunity to take technological leadership on the global stage. The NSCAI document also touches on the area of healthcare, calling for the implementation of a system that seems to be becoming reality thanks to the current coronavirus crisis. In discussing the use of AI in healthcare almost a year before the current crisis began, it states that China could lead the world in this sector, and this could lead to them exporting their tech and setting international norms. One reason for this is also that China has far too few doctors for the population and calls having enough doctors for in-person visits a legacy system. It also cited U.S. regulatory measures such as HIPAA compliance and FDA approval as obstacles that don't constrain Chinese authorities. HIPAA is that Privacy Act to release your health insurance, and your hospital intake stuff, and whatever happens in the hospital, your medical records, and FDA approval is the Food and Drug Administration. It's a federal agency, the U.S. government. More troubling, it argues, why does it keep doing that? Stop doing that when I'm trying to finish this video. More troubling, it argues that the potential impact of government-supplied data is even more significant in biology and healthcare, and says it is likely that the Chinese government will require every single citizen to have their DNA sequenced and stored in government databases, something nearly impossible to imagine in places as privacy conscious as the U.S. and Europe. It continues by saying that the Chinese apparatus is well equipped to take advantage and calls these civilian DNA databases a logical next step. This is just fucking awful. It's a logical next step to sequence everybody's DNA. Get the hell out of here. How do I know what you're going to do with my DNA? It's absurd. You create an army of people to kill us, or an army of people to replace us, or whatever. It's just awful. Who are the NSCAI? Given the sweeping changes to the U.S. that the NSCAI promoted in this presentation last May, it becomes important to examine who makes up the Commission and to consider their influence over U.S. policy on these matters, particularly during the current crisis. As previously mentioned, the chairman of the NSCAI is Eric Schmidt, the former head of Alphabet, Google's parent company, who has also invested heavily in Israeli intelligence-linked tech companies, including the controversial startup incubator Team 8. In addition, the committee's vice chair, Robert Work, is not only a former top Pentagon official, but is currently working with the think tank CNAS, which is run by John McCain's longtime foreign policy advisor and Joe Biden's former national security advisor. Other members of the NSCAI are as follows: Safra Catz, CEO of Oracle, with close ties to Trump's top donor Sheldon Adelson. Steve Chien, supervisor of the Artificial Intelligence Group at Caltech's Jet Propulsion Lab. Mignon Clyburn, Open Society Foundation Fellow and former FCC Commissioner. Chris Darby, CEO of In-Q-Tel, CIA's venture capital arm. Ken Ford, CEO of the Florida Institute for Human and Machine Cognition. Jose Marie Griffiths, president of Dakota State University and former National Science Board member. Eric Horvitz, director of Microsoft Research Labs. Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon Web Services, CIA contractor. Gilman Louie, partner at Alsop Louie Partners and former CEO of In-Q-Tel. William Mark, director of SRI International and former Lockheed Martin director. Jason Matheny, director of the Center for Security and Emerging Technology, former assistant director of National Intelligence and former director of IARPA, Intelligence Advanced Research Project Agency. Kathleen McFarland, consultant at Cypress International and former assistant secretary of defense for acquisition, and Andrew Moore, head of Google Cloud AI. As can be seen in the list above, there is a considerable amount of overlap between the NSCAI and the companies currently advising the White House on reopening the economy: Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Lockheed Martin, Oracle, and one NSCAI member, Oracle's Safra Catz, is on the White House's Economic Revival Task Force. There's also overlap between the NSCAI and the companies that are intimately involved in the implementation of the contact tracing coronavirus surveillance system, a mass surveillance system promoted by the Jared Kushner-led private sector coronavirus task force. That surveillance system is set to be constructed by companies with deep ties to Google and the U.S. national security state, and both Google and Apple, who create the operating systems for the vast majority of smartphones used in the U.S., have said they will now build that surveillance system directly into their smartphone operating systems. Just atrocious. Oh, God, call them all out. Just horrible. Wow. Unbelievable. Absolutely fucking beyond dystopian. Just psychopathic, sociopathic, insane, anti-democratic, just brutal, authoritarian bullshit. Anyway, from private companies that we let get too much power in government. Oh, God. Also notable is the fact that In-Q-Tel and the U.S. intelligence community has considerable representation on the NSCAI, and that they also boast close ties with Google, Palantir, and other Silicon Valley giants, having been early investors in those companies. Both Google and Palantir, as well as Amazon, also on the NSCAI, are also major contractors for U.S. intelligence agencies. In-Q-Tel's involvement on the NSCAI is also significant because they have been heavily promoting mass surveillance of consumer electronic devices for use in pandemics for the past several years. Much of that push has come from In-Q-Tel's current executive vice president, Tara O'Toole, who was previously director of the Johns Hopkins University for Health Security and also co-authored several controversial BioWare pandemic simulations, such as Dark Winter. In addition, since at least January, the U.S. intelligence community and the Pentagon have been at the forefront of developing the U.S. government's still classified 9/11-style response plans for the coronavirus crisis alongside the National Security Council. Few news organizations have noted that these classified response plans, which are set to be triggered if and when the U.S. reaches a certain number of coronavirus cases, has been created largely by elements of the national security state, i.e., the NSC, Pentagon, and intelligence, as opposed to civilian agencies for those focused on public health issues. Furthermore, it has been reported that the U.S. intelligence community, as well as U.S. military intelligence, knew by at least January, though recent reports have said as early as last November that the coronavirus crisis would reach pandemic proportions by March. The American public were not warned, but elite members of the business and political classes were apparently informed, given the record numbers of CEO resignations in January and several high-profile insider trading allegations that preceded the current crisis by a matter of weeks. Perhaps even more disconcerting is the added fact that the U.S. government not only participated in the eerily prescient pandemic simulation last October known as Event 201, it also led a series of pandemic response simulations last year. Excuse me. Crimson Contagion was a series of 4 simulations that involved 19 U.S. federal agencies, including intelligence and the military, as well as 12 different states and a host of private sector companies that simulated a devastating pandemic influenza outbreak that had originated in China. It was led by the current HHS Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, Robert Kadlec, who was a former lobbyist for military and intelligence contractors and a Bush-era Homeland Security bioterrorism advisor. In addition, both Kadlec and the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, which was intimately involved in Event 201, have direct ties to the controversial June 2001 BioWare exercise Dark Winter, which predicted the 2001 anthrax attacks that transpired just months later in disturbing ways. Though efforts by media and government were made to blame the anthrax attacks on a foreign source, the anthrax was later found to have originated at a U.S. bioweapons lab, and the FBI investigation into the case has been widely regarded as a cover-up, including by the FBI's once lead investigator on that case. Oh boy. Given the above, it is worth asking if those who share the NSCAI's vision saw the coronavirus pandemic early on as an opportunity to make the structural changes it had deemed essential to countering China's lead in the mass adoption of AI-driven technologies, especially considering that many of the changes in the May 2009 document are now quickly taking place under the guise of combating the coronavirus crisis. The NSCAI's vision takes shape. Though the May 2019 NSCAI document was authored nearly a year ago, the coronavirus crisis has resulted in the implementation of many of the changes and the removal of many of the structural obstacles that the Commission argued needed to be drastically altered in order to ensure a technological advantage over China in the field of AI. The aforementioned move away from cash, which is taking place not just in the U.S., but internationally, is just one example of many. For instance, earlier this week, CNN reported that grocery stores are now considering banning in-person shopping, and that the U.S. Department of Labor has recommended that retailers nationwide start using a drive-through window or offering curbside pickup to protect workers for exposure to coronavirus. In addition, last week, the state of Florida approved an online purchase plan for low-income families using the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Other reports have argued that social distancing inside grocery stores is ineffective and endangering people's lives. As previously mentioned, the May 2019 NSCAI document argues that moving away from in-person shopping is necessary to mitigate China's adoption advantage, and also argued that when buying online is literally the only way to get what you want, consumers go online. Reports have also argued that these changes in shopping will last far beyond coronavirus, such as an article by Business Insider entitled, "The Coronavirus Pandemic is Pushing More People Online and Will Forever Change How Americans Shop for Groceries, Experts Say." Those cited in the piece argue this shift away from in-person shopping will be permanent, and also states that more people are trying these services than otherwise would have without this catalyst, and gives online players a greater chance to acquire and keep a new customer base. A similar article in Yahoo News argues that thanks to the current crisis, our dependence on online shopping will only rise because no one wants to catch a virus at a shop. Oh, yeah. Well, I talk to people either. About what's going on in your government, or if it's good or bad. Yeah, like let's just all sit at home. This is the whole plan, to keep us more ignorant and to exploit us more. I gotta get through this article before it cuts me off. In addition, the push towards the mass use of self-driving cars has also gotten a boost thanks to coronavirus, with driverless cars now making on-demand deliveries in California. 2 companies, one Chinese-owned and the other backed by Japan's SoftBank, have since been approved to have their self-driving cars used on California roads and that approval was expedited due to the coronavirus crisis. The CPO of Neuralink, the SoftBank-backed company, was quoted in Bloomberg as saying that the COVID-19 pandemic has expedited the public need for contactless delivery services. Our R2 fleet is custom designed to change the very nature of driving and the movement of goods by allowing people to remain safely at home while their groceries, medicine, and packages are brought to them. Notably, the May 2019 NSCAI document references the interconnected web of SoftBank-backed companies, particularly those backed by its largely Saudi-funded Vision Fund, forming the connective tissue for a global federation of tech companies set to dominate AI. Doesn't that sound lovely? A connective tissue for a global federation of tech companies set to dominate AI. Oh, great. So, we'll give more power to huge corporations that already have way too much power and invade our privacy and sell our data and give information to the government just so we can adapt to the new technology because we can't afford to pay for it. So, just by joining Facebook and YouTube and trying to do these channels, you're giving up so many rights and giving so much data away, and it's just absurd. But anyway, it is what it is. It's how you operate now. They made it that way. California isn't the only state to start using self-driving cars, as the Mayo Clinic of Florida is now also using them. Using artificial intelligence enables us to protect staff from exposure to this contagious virus by using cutting-edge autonomous vehicle technology and frees up staff time that can be dedicated to direct treatment and care for patients. Kent Dealin, MD CEO of Mayo Clinic in Florida, stated in a recent press release cited by Mike. Like the changes to in-person shopping in the age of coronavirus, other reports assert that self-driving vehicles are here to stay. One report published by Mashable is entitled, "It Took a Coronavirus Outbreak for Self-Driving Cars to Become More Appealing," and opens by stating, "Suddenly, a future full of self-driving cars isn't just a sci-fi pipe dream. What used to be considered a scary, uncertain technology for many Americans now looks more like an effective tool to protect ourselves from a fast-spreading infectious disease." It further argues that this is hardly a fleeting shift in driving habits, and one tech CEO cited in this piece, Anuja Sonaker of SteerTech, claims that there has been a distinct warming up to humanless, contactless technology. Humans are biohazards, machines are not. Another focus of the NSCAI presentation, AI medicine, has also seen its star rise in recent weeks. For instance, several reports have touted how AI-driven drug discovery platforms have been able to identify potential treatments for coronavirus. Microsoft, whose research lab director is on the NSCAI, recently put $20 million into its AI for Health program to speed up the use of AI in analyzing coronavirus data. In addition, telemedicine, a form of remote medical care, has also become widely adopted due to the coronavirus crisis. Several other AI-driven technologies have similarly become more widely adopted thanks to coronavirus, including the use of mass surveillance for contact tracing, as well as facial recognition technology and biometrics. A recent Wall Street Journal report stated that the government is seriously considering both contact tracing via phone geolocation data and facial recognition technology in order to track those who might have coronavirus. In addition, private businesses like grocery stores and restaurants are using sensors and facial recognition to see how many people and which people are entering their stores. As far as biometrics go, university researchers are now working to determine if smartphones and biometric wearables already contain the data we need to know if we have become infected with the novel coronavirus. Those efforts seek to detect coronavirus infections early by analyzing sleep schedules, oxygen levels, activity levels, and heart rate based on smartphone apps like Fitbit and smartwatches. In countries outside the U.S., biometric IDs are being touted as a way to track those who have and lack immunity to coronavirus. In addition, one report in The Edge argued that the current crisis is changing what types of biometrics should be used, asserting that a shift towards thermal scanning and facial recognition is necessary. At this critical juncture of the crisis, any integrated facial recognition and thermal scanning solution must be implemented easily, rapidly, and in a cost-effective manner. Workers returning to offices or factories must not have to scramble to learn a new process or fumble with declaration forms. They must feel safe and healthy for them to work productively. They just have to look at the camera and smile. Cameras and thermal scanners, supported by a cloud-based solution and the appropriate software protocols, will do the rest. Also benefiting from the coronavirus crisis is the concept of smart cities, with Forbes recently writing that smart cities can help us combat the coronavirus pandemic. That article states that governments and local authorities are using smart city technology, sensors, and data to trace the contacts of people infected with the coronavirus. At the same time, smart cities are also helping in efforts to determine whether social distancing rules are being followed. That article in Forbes also contains the following passage. The use of massive connected sensors makes it clear that the coronavirus pandemic is, intentionally or not, being used as a testbed for new surveillance technologies that may threaten privacy and civil liberties. So aside from being a global health crisis, the coronavirus has effectively become an experiment in how to monitor and control people at scale. Another report in The Guardian states that if one of the government takeaways from coronavirus is that smart cities, including Shanghai or Shenzhen, are safer cities from a public health perspective, then we can expect greater efforts to digitally capture and record our behavior in urban areas, and fiercer debates over the power such surveillance hands to corporations and states. There have also been reports that assert that typical cities are woefully unprepared to face pandemics compared to smart cities. Yet, beyond many of NSCAI's specific concerns regarding mass AI adoption being conveniently resolved by the current crisis, there has also been a concerted effort to change the public's perception of AI in general. As previously mentioned, NSCAI has pointed out last year that in the press and politics of America and Europe, AI is painted as something to be feared that is eroding privacy and stealing jobs. Conversely, China views it as both a tool for solving major macroeconomic challenges in order to sustain their economic miracle and an opportunity to take technological leadership on the global stage. Now, less than a year later, the coronavirus crisis has helped spawn a slew of headlines in just the last few weeks that paint AI very differently, including how artificial intelligence can help fight coronavirus, how AI may prevent the next coronavirus outbreak, AI becomes an ally in the fight against COVID-19, coronavirus, AI steps up the battle against COVID-19, and here's how AI can help Africa fight the coronavirus, among numerous others. It is indeed striking how the coronavirus crisis has seemingly fulfilled the NSCAI's entire wish list and removed many of the obstacles to the mass adoption of AI technologies in the United States. Like major crises of the past, the national security state appears to be using the chaos and fear to promote and implement initiatives that would be normally rejected by Americans, and if history is any indicator, these new changes will remain long after the coronavirus crisis fades from the news cycle. It is essential that these so-called solutions be recognized for what they are, and that we consider what type of world they will end up creating, an authoritarian technocracy. We ignore the rapid advance of these NSCAI-promoted initiatives and the phasing out of so-called legacy systems, and with them, many long-cherished freedoms at our own peril. Republished from The Last American Vagabond by permission of author or representative. What a great article. Absolutely. I want to read that again. We ignore the rapid advance of these NSCAI-promoted initiatives and the phasing out of so-called legacy systems, and with them, many long-cherished freedoms at our own peril. This is absurd. This security state, you can blame like so many presidents in a row, but just to start with Clinton did it. He lessened laws to make to expand the security state. Obviously George W. Bush did it and greatly expanded it like tenfold, and then Obama tenfolded that, and now Trump wants to tenfold that. That's what's happening. Okay? So it's absurd, and we should not allow the federal government to track all Americans, or any Americans. We should not let tech companies gather this information. We should not use facial recognition at all for policing or for government purposes, because it will be used to target people, to silence people, to track people, and to monitor illegal activity, including protesting the government at some point, if we allow these things to happen, including maybe smoking marijuana or doing cocaine, which is a personal freedom, and these things shouldn't even be illegal. These are just examples. Even if you believe those things are wrong, to track what everybody does, everybody commits crimes. It will only be used against people who don't play ball and who challenge authority and fight for people. The dirt will be dug up on them, and you'll never be able to have any challengers to the elite power structure. Thanks for watching Punk Rock Politics. Make sure to subscribe. This is the end of my video, and this is part 2 of that